Hey, you guys, this is Anne Marie. I'm gonna give you a little story time. So earlier this week, I was talking to a client. I just completed my engagement with her. She was amazing. And I was telling her a little story during our last session. And I told her, I was telling her a story. I said, I should make a video about this. Because I was telling her a story in the context of how white men can be so resentful of educated Black women. We often talk about white women and how they operate in the white supremacy system, but we always need to remember to not give white men a pass, because the system was literally created to protect and elevate them more than any other group. And especially right now, they are showing their tails, right? And so, I was talking to this client, very familiar issues of working in a work environment, brilliant woman, phenomenally brilliant woman, charismatic, so super smart, highly educated, as we always are, working for someone who didn't even have a college degree, it turns out, but is in the top chair, big chair, right? But of course, this person then finds out how educated this person is, and instead of being impressed and proud, it enrages and upsets them because this person's excellence exposes his mediocrity. And so I was talking to her about an experience I had in a situation where I was dealing in a workplace with a person who was engaged in very problematic behavior. And I was explaining to her how arrogance and pride can get in the way of people's ability to make decisions that are even in their own best interest, right? Much forget the company's best interests, but their own best interests, about how pride and hubris and creating a competition with someone who doesn't even know yet y'all are in competition because they're too busy living their best life and doing their own thing. And that's often a lot of us as Black people, and especially as Black women. We're just coming to work. We're doing our job. We're engaging in excellence because that's what we know how to do. We're doing the best job we can because we know if we don't, that we won't be there for very long. We know we don't get to be mediocre the way that they do. And no one gets to be mediocre more than a white man. And that's just a statement of fact. I'm not saying they all are, but I'm saying that even when they are, they get away with it. The system protects them, right? And the reality is that they know it. Anyone who is mediocre knows that they are. And when other people come into their sphere who are not, those people will threaten them. Those people will scare them because they will always feel, well, what if everybody else figures out that I don't really know what I'm doing? And now this person is here, knows what they're doing, and it's going to show me up. And so they will often come after you, and you don't even understand where it's coming from because you're just here trying to do the best job you can, not realizing all the issues that they have that you have nothing to do with. So I was working at an organization, and you guys know I worked in the international development space for many, many years. Of my 20 plus years in the nonprofit corporate space, I think I spent about 15 or so of those years working in international development in different companies and different sectors, but always overseeing operations, HR, in some cases finance, IT, administration, all that stuff. So I was working at this organization, and it had many, many operations in lots of countries all over the world. We were doing work to support educating women, children, maternal child health, all kinds of different things, good governance, lots of stuff, good work. They're doing good work in lots of places that needed it. But the problem, USAID, I don't even know if they exist, but a lot of USAID was funding a lot of these programs, not just for my company, but across the international development space. And part of the way USAID operates is that you would have people in the country, but you would also have people in the United States overseeing the work in that country. And oftentimes, the people who were leading the work in the country are Americans or people from other Western countries, predominantly white and predominantly male. While I have found that a lot of the management of a lot of NGOs are white female, when you look closely, it's still majority white male space in terms of leadership, especially when you looked at people being sent abroad to do the top job, what we often call the chief of party job, right? We're white men predominantly. And that's data driven. That's a fact. Now, people leading these organizations in the U.S., there are a lot of women, white women, who lead them, but there's still majority of people who are leading international development firms in the United States are white men. And people talk a lot about the white women and their issues, and those issues are real. But I always am like, we must not forget who the architects of this system are and who this system was designed to protect and support first and foremost, right? And I believe that a lot of what is happening now in the United States is driven by their fear that they are losing their position and they are pitting everybody against everybody. But the objective is to keep them where they are. So we must not forget them, right? Because the people behind the scenes pulling the strings are predominantly them, okay? So I'm working, I take a job with this company. And when I come into the job, one of the first things that I am told is about a project that we had in a particular African country, which I will not name, and how well this particular person, a white male, he was not American, he was from another European country. But, if you understand history, you realize that all the people in the United States are descendants primarily of European countries. The British, the Dutch, the Germans, the Belgians, they have all had a role in promoting and creating the white supremacy system in the United States. All right? All of them. And so the people that we're dealing with now are descendants of those people. And so don't think that, I think that there's a narrative that tells you that, if you go to Europe, you're going to be treated better and people are better. I just think they're more polite about their racism. I don't necessarily think they're any less racist. That has been my experience as a person who's traveled over 43 countries. In most countries that I have been to that are majority white, the racism is there. All you have to do is scratch a little and you'll see it. The only place I can honestly say where I felt really welcomed and treated really, really well as a Black person and never really had to think about the fact that I was a Black person the entire time I was in the country was when I went to Ireland last year. And that's the truth. Every other majority white country I've ever been to, I've either experienced racism or witnessed it. Most of the time, I witnessed it. I didn't experience it personally because my American citizenship protected me. One of the nice things about traveling abroad as a Black American is that your citizen, that blue passport, protects you from a lot of things. That American accent protects you from a lot of things. But if you sit and watch how African people are treated in a lot of these countries, you understand that if you didn't have that blue passport, you might not be treated as well as you are. But that's all I'm going to say because this is really a video about travel. But, if you want more content about travel, you can follow me on my travel platform. But this person was from a Western European country and had been sent to this African nation to administer a program for us. And I was told over and over about how good a job this person was doing and that this person was a superstar and they were great and that their project was a model for our other projects that we were running, right, in other places. And we were operating over 70 countries, I think, at that point. So, I made a note of that. I remember meeting the person early on at a meeting. We used to bring people in from the countries to have meetings in our headquarters and for everyone to know each other and do team building stuff. Once a year, they would bring people, representatives from every office over to the headquarters. And I remember meeting him. And even from the first time I met the person, they didn't rub me the right way. But again, the person didn't work for me. They said the person was doing a great job, whatever. But as time went on, we started noticing that there was a lot of information hoarding happening, that there was information not being shared from that office to headquarters. I had undertaken a project to review the policies, the operational policies, and make sure that we had uniform policies really around, especially around our security procedures, and as well as, how we opened and closed offices, because I was responsible for overseeing when we got an award for a program and we had to institute a program in a country. The people who were on my team were responsible for making sure that we opened our offices in compliance, not just with the rules of the project, but in compliance with the laws of every country in which we were operating, to make sure that we did not run afoul of any of those rules and regulations, we needed to make sure that we were opening and closing offices, we were getting the proper licenses, registering the offices properly, etc. And I had found that there was a lack of uniformity when I got there. People were kind of half-assing it in many regards. And so we worked on getting some uniformity, making sure that everybody was doing certain things uniformly, especially when it came to security procedures, as well as making sure that everybody was properly registered, registrations were maintained properly, all those things. I had a really great team of people working with me who worked really hard. Not a large team, small team, but they worked really hard and they did a really good job. And so I had started visiting the offices to make sure, first of all, that people knew who I was, and also to make sure that we were implementing things and setting things up the right way. And I found that going to the offices in person was really allowing me to know things and learn things that I would not know if I stayed in the US, because sometimes, especially culturally, from a cultural perspective, face-to-face works better. Not Teams, not Zoom, sitting across the table from someone and talking to them is how you learn things. And so we were finding that we were having difficulty getting information from this office and from this individual. And that when we would ask for the information from this individual, they would avoid giving it to not just my team, but across the organization, especially the person who had oversight of all of the programs. A new person had come in, it was a woman, and this person really was pushing back on providing information that he had a responsibility to provide. And then we had sent people down there, and they had experienced really difficult interactions with him in terms of him not showing up, him obviously recording them while they were talking to him. All kinds of weird stuff was going on. And we had conversations internally about how to deal with it. In the meantime, I was trying to set up a visit to the office with my team. We had visited many other countries, and we would try to group the visits together to save money and to be sure we were managing our budget properly. If we were going to Africa, to a certain region, for example, we would try to visit all the country offices in the Eastern region or in the Western region. Because if you've been to Africa, you know Africa is huge. So, traveling from the West to the East can be very expensive. If you're going from the East to the South can be very expensive. So you try to do a regional visit. So if you're going to, visit office in South Africa, then you would try to go visit other offices if you had them in that region, not just in South Africa. If you had offices, for example, in Ghana, then if you had other work in other parts of Western Africa, you would try to focus on visit places. So we were doing things that way. So we decided that, we were going to be doing a visit back to the continent, and we wanted to include this country in that visit because no one had been there. From our team, no one had been there. In the whole history, no one had been there to look at the registration stuff, look at whatever. And there were things that we were getting that wasn't lining up. And so it was like, we need to go down there. Me and the person who worked on, country office operations were going around. So we were trying to get there. And there was a whole lot of evasion. They did not want us to come. And other people were experiencing the same thing, who had oversight over this person, also were having difficulty scheduling, setting up to go to the office, right? So while this was going on, and this person was actively giving us a lot of problems, and people were complaining, but the excuse was always, well, this person does a good job and he's well liked by the funders, so we should kind of leave him alone, which never sat right with me. Because my thing was, it doesn't matter how well liked this person is liked by the funders. If they're not following the rules, if they're not conducting themselves appropriately, that shouldn't matter. And it was very clear to me that if this person hadn't been white and male, he wouldn't have been getting the amount of leeway he was getting. And obviously, the program was producing results that the funders liked. And so those three factors together was giving this person a certain level of invincibility that was somewhat troubling to me. Right? But the person was still not really on my direct radar. He only got on my radar when my person started having difficulty trying to set up visits and to getting information about the setup of the office, the registration of the office, things like that. So we were getting to a place where they were getting ready to renew the project, right? They're putting in, that's another thing that when you're in international development, none is surprising to you. but you have to, even if you get awarded, let's say you get awarded $10 million to administer a program over a 10-year period or 5-year period, right? And so that's about $2 million a year for 5 years, right? And that includes the project management, the staffing, all of that. Then that sounds like a lot of money, but then when you start breaking it down into salaries and, these chief of parties, these Americans and other Westerners that go and live in these countries, they live like fat cat rats. These people who are deployed, and I'm not saying they shouldn't live well, but I'm saying when you go into a country that's a third world country where people are making $1 a day or something, and you get to live on a compound and you have a driver and your kid gets to go to international private school, all of which is paid for by the program. Meanwhile, the local staff are probably getting paid, maybe in some of these countries, they're still living better than local people because maybe the local person makes, these are not definite numbers, I'm giving you examples. So say the local person makes $1 a day. The person working on the project that might make $5 to $10 a day, right? So these jobs are highly prized. And these are educated local people. These are often college educated local people, but they're not making the kind of money that a college educated local person would make in Europe or in the United States or in Canada, right? So $5 to $10 a day might seem like a little bit of money to us, but it might be a lot of money based on that person's cost of living and what other people are making. So when people get these jobs, they're willing to put up with a lot of things to keep these jobs. Right? The hardest working people I've ever interacted with were people who worked in these offices. They worked really hard. They were ethical, good, kind, helpful people. The chiefs of parties, often not so much. The heads of the offices, who were always Westerners, whether they're Europeans or Americans, often not so much. And these people were the ones that were getting to live well, have drivers, have allowances, if they had their families with them, tuition for their kids to go to private school, international schools, all of these things. And so this person is living in this country, and it's a small, poor, third world country. And he's got a lot of people who are working in the office. And one of the things that one of the staff who went to visit the office noted very quickly was that people were very intimidated and may we say fearful of this person. It was very clear when they went to visit office that the local staff were afraid of this person, as well as the person's second in command, who was a local person. And you will see this not just in this situation, but in the United States as well and elsewhere, where people will often use people that look like you. They'll weaponize people that look like you to be the overseers and to be the architects of your misery. Right? So they'll be sitting somewhere and they may not interact with you at all, but they're the one behind the scenes telling the person who looks like you to do all these different things, right? Unkind things to you, right? So the overseers, the person you're interacting with that you think is making your life miserable is a person that looks like you. But the person who's telling them to make your life miserable is the person sitting in the big chair who you never even interact with, who is more often than not a white person or a non-Black person, right? Who is actually pulling the strings. So you're hating on the Black or brown person and saying they're horrible and they're treating me bad and they look like me and they shouldn't be doing this, but you don't know the pressure and thing that's being exerted on them, that if they'll lose their job, they're worried about losing their position if they don't do what the person in the big chair, who never speaks to you, but is the person telling them to do this and do that and do this to you, right? Or is aware of what is doing and this person is doing and does nothing. And to me, neither one is a better option. So either they are directly telling the person to abuse the staff or abuse you, or they know the person is being abusive and they're not doing anything because they feel that this person gets the results I want, so I don't care what they do to get the results. As long as I get to, keep my big check, have my driver pick me up every day at 4:00, keep my kid in private school and live in this nice big house with servants and housekeepers and whatever, courtesy of the United States government, then what do I care, right? As long as the program is giving the results that the funder wants, right? And the books are being kept right and money ain't going missing, nobody's going to ask any questions and nobody's going to care how I treat these local people in this country. That's the mindset a lot of these people have. So as long as the project is actually meeting its objectives, whatever that is, whether it's to educate this number of children, open this number of schools, do this number of projects, whatever, oftentimes, not always, but in certain circumstances, and definitely in this circumstances, people weren't paying close enough attention. And I'm not even saying the people in my company did not care. I think that because no one complained, and local staff, you will find a lot of countries from a cultural perspective and otherwise, people won't say anything, especially if you don't ask them directly. They won't say anything about what's happening because they figure I'm getting paid $5 to $10 a day. That's way more than my mother or other people in my family. And it's helping me parent my family, take care of people that are important to me. I'm not saying anything. Even if I'm being mistreated, I'm making this money. I'm not going to say anything. And that should resonate with a lot of us because we do the same thing here in America as black people. So again, what I said is, and I told this story before about the importance of using your power to protect other people, is that I found that going into a country benefited me to learn things about what was happening, and that I realized that oftentimes not going, I wouldn't learn things. But in this particular situation, this person stopped coming to the annual meetings, kept giving reasons for why they wouldn't come to the meetings. No one was, when people went to the office, they found that the person really didn't want them to talk to the staff. They either wanted him to talk to their second in command, who was a local person, a local African person, or him, but they didn't want him to talk to anybody else. But they sensed that something wasn't right, but they weren't quite sure what it was. And at the same time, the project is up for renewal. And this person is loved by the funders. But internally, we're beginning to realize this person is a huge problem and that there are things that we may not know, but we're getting an inkling that something ain't right? And I'm having conversations with my counterpart, who's a white woman who oversaw all of the programs, and we're realizing that something might not be right, especially when someone had just come back and shared with us the fare they observed, the fact that this person was apparently surveilling the staff, had recording devices around, and was recording conversations without people's knowledge, etc. So this was instituting fear in the staff. And so we ended up terminating this person, to make a long story short, because of certain things that occurred. We ended up terminating this person. And one of the reasons that they decided to terminate the person was that they found out that the person was engaging in behavior that was in competition with the business, right? Basically, that the person was doing things that was going to compete with the business, which was against the policies, against their contract, et cetera, et cetera. But after this person was terminated, the person began to engage in a campaign of harassment against the organization. So they started sending communications to the board, sending emails to people in management. They began personally attacking me and my character across things. And as I said to my client, I didn't care. None of this stuff concerned me. I knew that the decision to terminate the person was the right one. And so even though this person was threatening lawsuits, threatening all these things, I felt that the company had made the right decision. And so I wasn't concerned about the fact that this person was trying to attack me and attack my professional reputation inside the company. I didn't care. I knew that it was being motivated by anger and whatever. But other people in the company were very concerned about the fact that this person was sending all these crazy, missives around to people and attacking different people in the organization. But when this person left the organization, we were getting ready to have another one of our annual meetings where we brought people to the headquarters. And when we brought this, because this person was gone and the person who was their second in command was also removed, the third person was an African woman, and we brought her to headquarters. And I took her out for coffee. And I started asking her questions about her experience working in the office. And she started telling me things because I asked her. And through the conversation I had with the lady at the coffee, I uncovered a lot of improprieties and problematic things that had been occurring in that office that we did not have awareness of because no one had actually spoken directly to any of the other staff besides this person and their second in command. And I uncovered a lot of very problematic behavior and treatment of staff in the organization. Some things were quite disturbing to me and upsetting to me that I learned. But we were able to use some of those things that we learned to help us defend against the litigation and things that came when we let this person go. And we ultimately won in court. And the termination of the person was upheld by the court in that country, right? Which is where we had to litigate it because it occurred in that country and the person filed an action against us in court in that country. And we successfully defended ourselves. But the point I was making by telling the story was trying to explain to my client that people will often be governed by their anger and their emotions, and they're not thinking well about the fact that maybe sometimes it's better to cut your losses. It's better to just pay someone and let them go. But sometimes it's not. But sometimes it is. And often when you're in a situation where you're dealing with raising a concern about person in management, especially if you're dealing with the top person in an organization, the ego takes over. And that person will, push and fight and yell and scream and stomp their feet. And HR and other staff below them are afraid to say to them, it would be in your interest to just let this thing go. It might be in your interest to just pay this person and settle this thing. But when the person is the top person, it's very difficult to navigate that even as an HR person because the person is also your boss. And so when they're, throwing these temper tantrums and writing these crazy missives and sending it around to everybody, there's not a whole lot you can do to make them stop besides trying to get a lawyer in front of them get the lawyer to tell them, you might want to knock it off and you might want to just see if you can settle this thing and not make it become an issue in court. But oftentimes people, and this ain't just, people in management, also employees, you let your emotions take over. And when you are dealing with workplace issues, it's critically important to keep your head and to not let your emotions govern the way that you behave yourself and the way that you conduct yourself in these situations. I recently spoke to someone who was dealing with a very, difficult work environment, and she shared certain things that she had done. For example, she hung up the phone on the HR person when they were calling her to talk to her. And I told her that was not something that she should have done because it would allow them to create a narrative and say that you're unstable, you're chaotic. And it supports their narrative that you're a problematic person. You always have to not let your emotions govern the way that you conduct yourself, even when you're being treated unfairly, when people are saying stuff about you that bothers you that is not true, even when someone fires you, you can't let your emotions take over. You got to keep your head. You got to keep your head when everyone else is losing theirs, especially as Black people, as Black women in these work environments. We can't be the one who is angry and combative because that plays into the narrative they want to create about you anyway. You have to keep your head. You can't be emotional. I always often say this to my clients. You can't be emotional now. You have to be even-tempered, keep your cool, listen more than you speak. Let people say things that are not true and just write it down and respond in writing later. You don't have to react to everything someone says, even when they're saying something that is not true. You can't be writing missives and sending stuff around and acting crazy, right? You have to listen because that was a very important thing that came into play even in the situation I just mentioned. I took the woman to coffee, I asked her some questions, and then I listened and I let her talk. And it was almost like she had just been waiting for somebody to ask her. She had just been waiting for somebody to ask the right questions, and she just busted wide open. She just gave up everything, gave me everything that had been going on in the office, right? That became very helpful to us to use, right? And it was a lot of very problematic, very upsetting things, very disturbing things that I won't get into detail about, right? But because I went, I took her to coffee, I sat down, I asked her questions, and then I stopped talking and I listened. And I let her tell me what she wanted to tell me without asking any other questions. I just let her answer the basic question about what the work environment was like. And she told me everything that I needed to know. And so I think it's really important for us to learn that when you're in dealing with workplace issues and difficult workplace issues, listen. Listen to yourself, trust your intuition, listen to that inner voice that all of us have, especially as women, and listen to what people say around you, even when what they're saying is problematic and hurtful and straight up untruthful. Listen, write things down. Don't react to everything as soon as you hear it. Don't react, don't overreact, don't underreact. Don't react. Listen, write down things, and then respond to them later. In writing, you respond to them later. But you don't have to get angry. Don't hang up on people. Don't throw temper tantrums. Don't raise your voice. Don't do any of the things that they want you to do so that they can use it against you. Keep your cool. Keep your cool and save your anger. Use your anger, channel your anger into your strategy. But never let them know how angry you are. Never let them know how upset you are. A person who cannot control their emotions cannot control themselves. You have to be able to regulate your emotions and keep them in check, even when people are behaving in ways that are hurtful, unfair, untruthful, and problematic at work. Ultimately, it's what will help you win. It's what will help you beat them. We are in an environment now where people are engaging in all kinds of problematic behavior because they think they can, right? Keep notes, document, as I always explain, document everything, but never let them see you sweat. Never let them see how upset you are. Never let them see that what they're doing is getting to you. If you got to go for a walk, go for a walk. I remember at one job, I used to go for a walk every day by the end of my time there because it was the only way that I can come in there and punch somebody in the throat. Go for a walk. Write things down. Keep a journal and create a strategy to get yourself out of the environment. But don't let people see how you feel. Don't overreact. Don't throw temper tantrums. Don't get angry. This person's ultimate undoing in the situation I'm telling you about was because he could not control himself. And he was writing things and sending missives all over the place. And by doing that, he was telling everybody his thoughts. You knew what he was thinking. If you know what someone's thinking, you can plan for them. You can create a whole strategy knowing how they're going to react and what they're going to do. People should never know what you're going to do before you do it. That's a piece of advice my mother always told me, was not to let that. She used to tell me I talk too much. People don't need to know everything you think. And it's true. People don't need to know everything you think, especially at work, especially when you're dealing in a situation where you're trying to defend yourself against discrimination, against toxic hostile work environment, a combination of all those things. You got to be creating your strategy, executing your strategy, but you don't need to be talking about your strategy. You don't need to tell people what you're going to do. You don't need to tell people that you're going to file an EEOC complaint, for example. You just need to go do it. Don't threaten to do nothing. Just do the things you think you need to do to protect yourself. That's one of the things that I help my clients do. And I often have to tell them, don't say anything. We're not saying anything till we're ready to say it. We're not sending anything till we're ready to send it. We don't make threats. I don't have my clients ever make a threat. I have my clients make plans, strategies, execute them. You don't ever tell anybody what you're getting ready to do to them, because that in of itself can get you into trouble making threats. You don't make threats. You just execute, right? And so I hope this video and this story is helpful in explaining, how important it is to keep control of yourself, even when everyone else around you is not keeping control of themselves, especially when you're dealing with discrimination in your workplace. Get a strategy, execute the strategy, and say as little as possible while you execute the strategy. If you feel that you're dealing with discrimination in your workplace, please reach out to me, book a discovery call. Let's talk about it and help you get your strategy for exit as soon as possible. Of course, this is still the month of August. I'm still running a sale on my master course bundle, which teaches all the things that I teach my clients one-to-one about how to create a strategy, how to recognize discrimination, how to document it, how to talk about it in your workplace in order to get a separation with severance from your employer, and then also how to negotiate a separation with severance when it is offered to you so that you get the best possible deal that you can from your employer without having to hire a lawyer or end up in court for years and years and years. I hope this video was helpful. I hope this story was helpful. If it was, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, comment, but do so constructively, and share your own thoughts in the comments about times that you felt like you wanted to punch somebody in the throat but didn't because you realized it wasn't in your best interest. Times when you wanted to curse somebody out in the office but you didn't because you realized it was not in your long-term interest. Tell me about the times that you had to exercise learning to keep your composure, to keep it together, to not act crazy, even when other people were acting crazy around you, so that you could reach the objective that you were trying to reach. Hope this video was helpful. I'll see you in the next one. HR is not your enemy, but they're definitely not your friend, but I am. See you soon. Bye.